Thank you, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. I rise in strong support of ACA 8. And like at least 2/3 of you in this room, I read the constitutional amendment, which makes it very clear that we are not approving any maps in this body. We are giving the voters the decision, something that isn't happening in Texas. And even doing that was something we had to debate fiercely. California's responsibility to Californians and Californians' responsibility to this country. We didn't want to be in this situation. The authoritarian in the White House put us in this situation when he used House Republicans in Texas to disenfranchise vulnerable people. After those maps in Texas are approved, a Latino voice in Texas is worth 1/3 of the representation as a white voice. A black voter in Texas is worth 1/5 of the representation of a white voter in Texas. I didn't say 3/5. There was no compromise. I said 1/5. That is the kind of gerrymandering, that is the kind of theft that they are perpetuating. And we can't just sit by and let it happen. We won't just sit by and let it happen. But that doesn't mean we lose ourselves. That's why when I was chair of the Elections Committee, I authored an update to the Fair Maps Act that prevented incumbency from being a consideration in map drawing, and every single Republican on this floor voted against it. That's why I authored legislation calling for independent redistricting commissions on school boards and counties and special districts all throughout the state, and every Republican in this House voted against it. How convenient to switch your tone when you are now on the line. When we are stepping up and speaking the way Californians deserve for us to stand up and fight, because we are tired of being the punching bag of this country when we freely give. When North Carolina is on fire, we show up. When a hurricane hits Florida, we show up. When Texas is flooding, we show up. We don't wait for Canada and Mexico to show up first like Texas did supporting Los Angeles this year. We come immediately. When we pay $80 billion more in federal taxes than we get back, we don't complain. We know our role is to support others. And when the biggest disaster to ever hit our state hits and we ask for a portion of our own dollars back and you withhold it, we have to change our tone. We have to step up because your silence is deafening. When they took health care and food and veterans assistance, and they made it harder for students to go to college, and they put trillions of dollars in national debt, and you said nothing. That forced us to step into the void. When they held our #1 public university hostage for $1 billion of California tax dollars, and you have said nothing, we had to step into that void. You talk about fighting fire with fire and how we shouldn't do that. While simultaneously a member of your own caucus just yesterday asked the Department of Justice and Pam Bondi to investigate us criminally. I took that personally that you didn't say anything. We are not just going to sit by and let our democracy crumble. Here in California, we're standing on business.
What Bryan said on that floor wasn't just another partisan jab. It was a diagnosis of how power actually works in America when the map makers, not the voters, hold the pen. He's backing ACA 8 because it pushes the final say to voters, not politicians, and that matters. Redistricting sounds technical, but it's the quiet place where outcomes get locked in before a single vote is cast. If you can design districts to splinter a community or glue it to one hundreds of miles away, you don't have to win arguments. You just have to win the lines. Bryan's core claim is about who is being heard and who is being softened to a whisper. When he talks about Latino and Black voters in Texas having their power diluted, he's naming a tactic with a long history. Crack a city so its diverse neighborhoods are scattered into sprawling rural districts, or pack them so tightly that their influence is limited to one safe seat while everything around it flips the other way. Lawyers call it community of interest when you keep neighborhoods together because they share schools, media, transit, and culture. Gerrymandering breaks those communities apart on purpose. The result isn't just different representation, it's different priorities. Transit gets dropped for highways, housing turns into a talking point rather than a plan, and local needs disappear into a district office 3 hours away. California's response, independent commissions, criteria like contiguity and compactness, and laws that forbid using incumbency or partisan data, didn't happen by accident. It came from years of watching legislatures abuse the process and from court rulings that set the guardrails. After the Supreme Court's Rucho decision removed federal courts from policing partisan gerrymanders, the fight shifted to states. California built a system to put distance between politicians and the map drawing pen. Bryan's point is simple. We're trying to keep that distance, even when it's inconvenient, even when it means letting voters make the last call. That contrast with Texas is the heart of his argument. There's also a power dynamic he surfaces that viewers shouldn't miss: how dissent gets handled. When a majority starts treating colleagues like liabilities to be controlled, surveilled, threatened, or dragged into performative investigations, the map fight becomes something bigger than shapes on paper. It becomes a test of whether democratic norms still mean anything. You can hear it in Bryan's frustration. California shows up for other states in crisis, pays more into the federal government than it gets back, absorbs disaster after disaster, and when it asks for a fair process or its share of support, it's plenished with silence or political theater. That's not a policy disagreement. That's using procedures and pressure to make a point about who's allowed to set the terms. The "we don't want to be in this situation" line matters. It's an admission that reform isn't glamorous. Independent commissions are slow, rules-driven, and often messy, but they're designed to withstand exactly the moment we're in, when national figures try to bend state processes into partisan machines. Bryan is reminding his colleagues, if you keep your eye on principles, equal voice, transparent process, communities kept whole, you don't have to fear who wins the next election, because the ground rules are fair. For viewers, here's the takeaway that goes beyond the clip. Redistricting decides whether your school board member knows your neighborhood, whether your representative lives within a reasonable drive, whether your vote can actually swing a race. It decides if wildfire funding reaches the towns that burn, if transit dollars follow the commuters who need them, if healthcare clinics are cited where the data, not the politics, say they should be. When maps are rigged, the budget is next, and then the policy that touches your daily life. Bryan is also calling out a pattern: reject independent commissions, fight fair maps laws, and then cry foul when a state tries to protect itself from the same playbook being used elsewhere. You can disagree on policy and still respect process. Gerrymandering is what happens when the process is the policy, when the map is the strategy. So ask yourself one question while you watch this debate. Who should fear a fair map? If your coalition is confident, you welcome neutral rules. If your plan relies on a maze of lines that splice neighborhoods and mute certain voters, the problem isn't the commission, it's the platform. If this helped you see the stakes more clearly, don't just scroll. Share this with someone who thinks redistricting is boring. It's not boring, it's power. Add your voice in the comments. Should voters or politicians hold the pen? And if you want more breakdowns that connect the dots between process and power, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Democracy doesn't defend itself. People do.